Hello and welcome to month one of the 12-month process of launching Project 13, which gets you well on your way to becoming an exponential church as you've read about in all these case studies from around the world. Month one is kind of one of the very beginning stepping stones. It's one of the first steps, and each month we'll be coming back here for our Inventing the Future meetings. And so I'll be introducing the meeting to you each month, and then you guys will get to work. And you'll talk about what has happened in the last month, what work you have been doing. Each of the five members of the strategic task force for Project 13 or members of your team, and then talk about what's going to be happening the next 4 weeks. And so whatever you're doing, whatever your job is on the one rail of the train, the church, what you've been doing as far as your job, making it successful, you want to keep doing that, but find a way to reduce that to a smaller percentage of your time, like 60% of your time, so you can spend 40% of your time on inventing the future. Now, let me just say, this is not unusual, not just in ministries, but in big companies. You know, most of the times when we hear about, hey, we got a new project, well, who are we going to hire to do that? But in big companies, they have very strict budgets, right? Even though they have profit margins and all that, they're not borrowing from their profit margin to start new initiatives. And I've heard so many stories of this where basically either everybody absorbs one person's job so that one person could focus on this new project, so it doesn't cost the company anymore but to get it launched because they don't know if it's going to make them money or not. And so must we think about how we reduce the percentage of our time to keep the one rail going while we develop the new rail. And that's Project 13. That's what we'll be doing on Inventing the Future. Remember, you don't have to take the future that just comes your way. You can invent it, you can create it, you can dream what the Lord wants and then plan for that rather than just kind of taking it as it comes. So, Inventing the Future monthly meetings I've got for you, and I hope you printed them out, a whole booklet about inventing the future and monthly agendas for you that you can basically fill in the blank. There's topics for month one, month two, month three, and then on each in time that you meet once a month. If you haven't set the meetings yet, go ahead and put them on your calendar. What day of each month are you going to meet? I would plan at least a half a day, maybe 3/4 of a day. Maybe you can start with a half if you need more time, because there's going to be some things that you're going to really want other people's input on your area in, okay? So you don't have to feel like you have to dream it up all yourself. I've given you as much data and information from all these different churches that I know of, but you're going to have to invent things and wrestle with things and roll things out. What do you think of this idea? What do you think of this idea? I'm thinking about doing it this way. So then each month has a theme. Month one, you'll see, is Building the Growth Factory. We'll talk about that and the things that need to happen that month. There's details for you to fill in each month, comments from your meeting to do things, painting the picture of the next month, the next 12 months, and you're constantly revisiting that and revisioning that and refining what the next 12 months look like. So here we are, and excited to start this 12-month implementation. I know you've taken 101, you've taken 201, and now we're implementing this part of 201, and that is Inventing the Future. So the very first step here, if you haven't done it yet, is assign the task force members. Now, I'm sure the senior pastor has already talked to you guys about that, and each of you should know who each person is. And there may be a number of other people in the room that are part of that task force team members team. So there's one that's leadership buy-in. That should be the senior pastor, because you're going to have, as the senior pastor, the clout, the credibility, the sway power. The church leaders need to know that you're all in on this. This is not something that your youth pastor or somebody else cooked up. This is a strategic direction of the whole team. There's the Building the Path team member, that strategic task force member. You're building the pathway. We'll talk about that. There's leadership training. That is, we're leading or teaching youth to lead, and we're developing the tools for them to lead, the training for them to lead, and implementing that. The fourth member of the task force is epic 13-year-old events, and we've talked about that. And then the fifth member is the research, the measurements, and the logistical person. So those are the five members. And so I hope you've already taken the blueprint that we've given you, printed it out, and there's one page for each month. and print them out if you haven't already. And part of the very first thing is, hopefully you did it on the last session or the last module, where you looked at the whole year and you set your dates. So I'm assuming that you've set your dates, first of all, set for the 2 big epic events, and you can revolve everything around those dates. And think about what makes most sense. If you're starting this in January, which a lot of people might do, a lot of churches might do as a kind of kick off the new year, then you can say maybe our first epic event might be great right before school gets out, like in April or May, right, whenever school gets out in your area. And of course, if you're down under or another hemisphere, it's going to be different. But give a reason for it. Maybe there's a big reason around the Easter season, maybe around a holiday, or let's do a big epic event for just 13-year-olds around a holiday. Another opportunity, plan the second epic event now, put it on the calendar, is maybe back to school. If your schools go back in August or September, well, that still gives you kind of a 4 months of breathing time before the next one. But it's also a natural time where people are thinking about going back to school, coming back together. Big reason to say, hey, back to school bash for all the 13-year-olds in this county or in this parish or in this part of the city, that kind of thing. So set those dates first, and then you can begin to fill in all the other blanks that there are in your exponential blueprint there. So I know I say so a lot in this, but as I say so, it's sort of like I'm going, okay, we're done with that. Let's go to the next one. So in each of these 5 areas, I just said it again there, we're going to review with you each month where you should be, what you should be thinking about, what you should be planning, what you should be working on in month 1. So in month 1, we're calling it the Building the Growth Factory. Now remember, let me see if I've got this slide for you here, that this implementation process, there's the quiet phase, the public phase, the deep phase, continuous improvement phase. So right now, you're in the quiet phase. It might last 3 to 4 months of quietness. That is, everybody doesn't know yet. The whole church doesn't know. Little by little, we're letting groups know, leadership groups and so forth, staff members and so on. But right now, you're in the quiet phase. That is, you're working hard. Each task force member is working hard. The people that are working with you are working hard. You're doing research, you're planning, you're turning over things. Just because nothing visible is going to happen. Listen, I learned a long time ago, if you want to do something big, something that's going to make a massive impact, it takes a lot of work before anybody knows about it. You're kind of on the DL. That's the phase you're in right now. You're in the quiet phase. And so during this first month, we're going to be talking about leadership buy-in at all levels, a senior pastor who leads that group, thinking through who are the different groups that need to kind of get pulled into the vision, and make sure that you explain this is on our heart, this is the direction we're going, and we really need you guys to be praying to be a part of this. And then also part of the building the factory is building the pathway, the model that you want people to follow from 13, 14, 15. Now it seems like that's a lot of work in advance. That's right, because there's work in advance to make something fantastic happen. You can't make a big event happen overnight. You can't plan a big event today and then tomorrow it happens. And you can't plan, the discipling of a whole generation. Like, what do you want them to be by the end of year 1 in their faith, in year 2, in year 3? But it takes time to dive down deep. And so we're going to talk about each person's job here. Number 1 is leadership buy-in at all levels. And so making the list, and during your Inventing the Future meeting, when you're done with this video, it's only going to last 5 or 10 more minutes. You're going to shut it off, and you're going to talk about leadership buy-in and who are all the different groups that need to be bought in the next 30 days, that need to have a presentation, that need to ask them to maybe find a Joshua, get them praying for some 13, 14-year-old. And so you're not just asking for them to say, hey, great plan, but you're asking for their heart to get involved in this thing, because it's really a strategic pivot and focus for the organization. So number 2 is building the pathway, and that is this pathway of growth. And so it starts right now. You're going to have your first epic event either in month 4 or month 5. And so you've got to start planning the first 4 weeks and then the next 12 weeks of the first trimester. Let's talk about some of the details of the planning. Now, if you want to use something off the shelf, of course, that's one of the decisions I hope you made already, whether you're going to develop yourself or do something off the shelf. But even if you're using something off the shelf, like Pathway to Freedom that we've developed for you here, you're going to want to understand it. Like, what is the growth path there? The first 4 weeks of Welcome to the Family, the first trimester, like what happens during those weeks? So you understand the pathway people are walking. I think one of the big challenges has been people say, hey, here's your discipleship. Just go read this stuff. Have a good time. Rather than, no, this is a journey. We're asking you to go on, and we know every detail about this journey. And so even if you're using something off the shelf, you're going to want to really know it. Let me just go through some of the details before I go on to this number 3 here. If you're thinking about developing it yourself, you're going to want to think about, first of all, what is the first 4 weeks? Like, just imagine, put yourself in their shoes. They're 13 years old, 13 and a half, maybe 14, and they've just come to Christ. They don't have a church. They don't know anything about God. They don't know anything about the church. They just know they're going to be a follower of Christ. And so some of the things you're going to want to think about if you're developing it yourself is, what are you welcoming them to? What does it mean to be a follower of Christ? Remember, we talked before about theology, and that, instead of asking them to accept Christ, because that's passive, or even receive Christ, because the word is passive in English, although in the original Greek it means to grab a hold of and never let go. And the idea of following Christ, Jesus said 32 different times throughout the Gospels, follow me, I'll make you fishers of men, take up your cross, follow me. Anytime he talked about getting connected to his Father, he said, follow me. He was actually, meaning that on several levels. Follow me physically, like he walked away to another village, they followed. But they also followed his lifestyles, his teaching. He asked them to obey. And so some of the things is, if you're going to develop it yourself, what are all the resources in your church? Other discipleship tools anybody's used, anybody at any age group that you could adopt to a younger generation. Do you want to write it yourself? And part of the opportunity here is to develop a construct that radical Christianity is the norm. We're not begging them to come back to church. We're when we give the altar call, it's full-on Christianity. Give your all to Christ, and we don't want to let up on that. So part of what we've did in Pathway to Freedom is we literally have a quiet time for them every day, starting the first day in Christ, like the very next morning, and every single day, each of the 7 days. And I would encourage you to think of something like this. You teach by what your expectations are. Teach them what a normal Christian walk is like. And so we're teaching them, hey, you've met Jesus. You need to meet with him every day, not just, don't be like the guy that, meets his wife on his wedding day and say, hey, I got to be out with the guys, do this and that, whatever. And whenever the wife begs him, he comes back home. No, this is like, I met Jesus, but I want to keep meeting with him every day. And so what we've done is developed the Pathway to Freedom, where there's something to do each week for the small group leader with his group, but there's something to do each day for each group member. And the group meeting kind of is a culmination of what they've been reviewing all week long, a quiet time, kind of a devotional it's downloadable, they get it, it's a PDF, they can fill it out, they can print it out if they want. There's videos to watch, there's cool things to do, there's interactive time between them and the Lord. What is the Lord speaking to you? And then they bring that all to the small group meeting. And so I understand we're trying to teach them several things. It's good to meet with Jesus every day. Good to ask him, what is he speaking to you through this verse of scripture each day? And then it's good to meet with a group of people, review that, process it, talk about it, and engage with each other, and then pray for each other. We've talked about what to do in those group meetings. And so if you're putting your own together, I would encourage you, make it not just a weekly thing, but something for each member to do every day in their quiet time. Because what you ask them to do in their quiet time, you're provoking them to engage with the Lord each day. So I would just encourage you to, if you're building your own pathway, is make sure you really understand a clear, I'm going to say the obvious, but what the gospel is, like, so that we really, we're not just praying a simple prayer and I love you, Jesus, and I'll see you when I get to heaven. No, you're starting a daily relationship with him. So the purpose of the pathway is you want to grow a huge pipeline. This is your pipeline. The pathway is your pipeline. You're building it, right? You're expecting young people when they're 13 and 14 and 15 to keep going through this pipeline to become mature men and women. So they land at 20, 21, 22. They're raging, fire coming out their ears, and smoke coming out their eyes, just for Jesus, they're deep in their faith, but they're passionate as well. They know God's word, and you're thinking about what you really want to accomplish with them going through this. And remember that discipleship is not simply, I gave them lots of stuff to know, but it's knowing and doing, just like Jesus taught the disciples, but then he said, now you go pray for the people. Now you go preach the gospel. It's knowing and doing. They watched him. He instructed them. He did it alongside them. Then he said, go and do. And so whatever we're teaching these guys in the pathway, we want them to learn part or knowing, but then there's a doing part. And the doing with should be with the small group leaders, right? So you're teaching them, let's how to pray together. This is how to deal with people's needs and so forth. So if you haven't decided yet, you're going to want to make sure you have planned, when are you going to do the small groups during this month? Think about it. Is it going to be before the main meeting? Is it going to be after the main meeting, after the Epic event? You're planning for a different weekly meeting, whenever that might be, and just so that you kind of get all that, the logistical part, how is this going to work, all in place, and you can kind of talk about that all together. So the next team member we want to talk about is the leadership training. Now, don't underestimate this. Now, don't underestimate how important this is. Leadership training for youth. So remember we talked about the first thing you're doing is finding some 14, 15, 16-year-olds right now during the quiet phase. You pull them aside one-on-one, have a Coke with them. Don't announce this to anybody that you're even doing this, and get maybe suggestions from people around the table. Who do you feel like really has character, really has demonstrated heart for God and passion for the Lord and commitment? And you're not hoping they get character. They've already developed it, right? And then take the first month or so to identify those guys, get commitments from them. Meanwhile, you're developing training for them. So after a month, you've got the first group selected. I will call them L1, Leadership 1. That's the first group that you're going to prepare for Epic event number 1. And you need to decide how many you need, depending on how many you think you're going to have at your Epic event. See, this is all interactive. Do you need 5 leaders? Do you need 10? Do you need 15? Do you need 20? Do you need 50? And then see if you can get that many based on people that all of you, someone around the table really knows, their credibility and their character. And so this month, while you're recruiting them, you're also putting what's the first steps of leadership that you want to have them take. Because in a month, you're going to start meeting with the first group, L1, of leaders. And that's why pathway, number 1, that we just talked about, developing the pathway, you got to have your first 4 weeks done. That is, welcome to the family. Because what this first group of leaders is going to have to do, when they start meeting in a month, you've recruited them, you say, hey, we're going to start meeting like for 45 minutes a week to kind of get you prepared for this big thing that's about to launch. And when you start meeting with them, first thing you're going to do is have them go through welcome to the family. Even though they've been Christians, you want them to know what the brand new follower of Christ is going to go through. And then number 2, they're taking a second dose, that is a leadership training. You're going to give them a book, have them buy a book, give it to them, whatever, buy it for them, and start reading through. Or if you've got other leadership training, that's great. You need to decide what is that first steps of leadership. I mentioned before things like Maxwell's books are a great way to start. It's usually fodder and information they do not know, and you can have them read a chapter a week. And then when you meet together each week, after that'll start next month, you'll talk about what did they get out of their quiet times. You're modeling for them. What did you learn each week? How did you apply it to your life? What did you learn each day? What did the Lord speak to you? Kind of like we described before, the small group kind of construct. Do that with them with the first 4 weeks. Because why? You're modeling for them exactly, what did you get out of it? What did the Lord speak to you? What did the Lord convict you about? What are you going to do differently? And then you also talk about the leadership book, the chapter you read. What did you get out of that? What did you like? What did you underline? You're fully expecting them to take notes and to underline. So that's the first steps for the first month for those of you that are preparing leadership, youth for leadership. The next member of the task force is the Epic event member. And so by now, of course, the date should be set. This month, you're going to want to plan the theme. By now, the date should be set. You're going to want to plan the theme. Procure the mega big draw gift that you want to give away. And again, I mentioned a car. It could be something else bigger than life, but something that's going to really make them gasp and go, oh my gosh, did you hear about that? That's what you want them to say. And then begin to start planning the marketing tidal wave. Okay, so this month there's a lot for you to do in planning for this epic event. And some other details regarding planning the event. You want to get some of the theme and the artwork begun, plan speakers, videos, music, worship, message, kind of get that in motion in cooperation with other people around the table there, the youth pastor, the pastor, and then planning the marketing, the theme, the art, and think about the footprint that you have that you want to impact there, 13-year-old footprint around your church, anybody that's represented by any school, and what percentage of them, this is some math, you're going to want to work in reverse. Okay, so if you want, I'm just going to make it up. If you've got 10,000 young people in your footprint, say, hey, we want 1,000 people at our first event. That's 10%. Okay, so you're just doing some math. So in order for that 1,000 to be there, math says they have to have at least 7 exposures. So you probably want to do more than maybe aim at, let's get 3,000 to have 7 exposures, believing that 1,000 will actually come. Okay, and so what are those exposures? They might be billboards, they might be digital media, videos that your youth make, all that kind of stuff. So, so you're planning that out. As I mentioned, plan what is the big giveaway, PlayStation, iPad, something cool. Find maybe somebody in your church or your community that can donate something like that, they could sponsor that. And then decide on the timeline of when you want to unleash the marketing blitz. So you don't release the marketing blitz right now, but you plan the timeline. How far in advance? It's going to have to be at least 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks before the big event where you start letting the whole world know. But you're going to have all your tools ready in advance, cool videos and so forth. And then finally, the research and measurements person. We need you to really know all 4 of those spreadsheets really well and begin to, both the internal measurements and the external measurements, begin to fill all those out. You're going to be asking each member of the team information that you don't know that they know. Ask them if they need any logistical help with anything that they're doing, because you're going to be more logistical, like make it happen kind of maybe a go-to person for them. Begin to assimilate all internal church information. Find ways to collect the information that you need for all the spreadsheets. The external measurements, the total population, all the junior and senior high schools in the footprint, all the 13-year-olds in the footprint. So there we go. Month 1. I hope you have got clear exactly what you need to do. Or why don't you go around the table, discuss each person's responsibilities for this next month, your deliverable, what you're going to bring back. Everybody take notes on it and maybe ask each other, how would you go about this? This is what I've got to do. Listen, we are inventing the future, okay? So if it was easy, somebody would have done it a long time ago. Well, actually, some people have done it, right? They've invented it as they went. At least we're learning from these best practices, so you don't have to figure out the construct. We've got the construct. We're just figuring out the application. So work on it hard. Decide, make a commitment around the table, everything you're going to bring back next month to the table, and then we'll see you next month at Inventing the Future, month 2.